What's up, guys? Welcome back to the channel where I teach you everything you need to know about accounting, audit, the CPA lifestyle, and everything in between. If that sounds awesome to you, make sure to hit that subscribe button below, and welcome to the accounting channel. All right, guys, I started a series on this channel where I teach you how to audit cash. It's a two-part series. If you happen to miss those, make sure to go watch them. I have it linked right here. But if you happen to watch this video while you're working, I'm going to go straight into a quick summary of how to audit cash from A to Z and essentially what the whole goal and purpose of auditing this balance is. So the whole main purpose is to reconcile the bank statement at period end to whatever the cash balance is on the trial balance at, let's just say, for example, you're auditing 12/31/2022 or fiscal year end 12/31. You're trying to reconcile the balance, the bank balance on the bank statement at 12/31 or period end to whatever cash balance they have on the general ledger at that point in time. And in order to do this, companies do this by preparing what's called a bank reconciliation. So there's really three key components in the bank reconciliation. You have your bank balance at period end, you have deposits in transit, you have outstanding checks, and then you have some miscellaneous items in there. Usually, hopefully you don't have any of those, but sometimes there can be. But for the most part, you have your bank balance, deposits in transit, outstanding checks lastly you have your final to get to your GL balance. And essentially, in order to get comfortable with every single component of the bank reconciliation, the bank balance, what you can do is you can agree that to not only the bank statement at period end, but you could also send a confirmation. Typically, a lot of firms use confirmation.com. You can send paper confirmations, but in the audit process, you will need to get comfortable with the bank balance, the bank balance at period end. And again, typically, and you would be required to send an audit confirmation. Again, a lot of people use confirmation.com. Run this by your senior, whoever you're working with, and ask them how we send confirmations for this client, and you will need to confirm the balance at period end. And typically, you will send confirmation to the bank, wherever your client banks at, and you let them know, hey, my client has X amount of bank accounts at your financial institution. Can you please confirm the balances at period end? What you do when you receive that confirmation is you agree that to the bank statement amounts, the bank amounts on their reconciliation. That's the first key component of a bank rec. The second key component is deposits in transit. Deposits in transit are essentially payments that were sent to the company that haven't cleared the bank yet. Again, you're reconciling from the bank statement balance to your ending GL balance. So in order to get there, you take your bank balance at period end plus deposits in transit. And the reason you add this to your cash balance is because these payments were sent to your client, but they haven't cleared the bank yet. So what you would do is you would ask your client for a listing. Typically, they will provide a listing of all of the deposits in transit they have when they close the books. And you would need to get comfortable with the deposit in transit listing. The second thing you'll need to do, and then to get comfortable with this deposit in transit listing, you would essentially need to test directly from the deposit in transit listing to test for existence. Remember that cash is an asset account. So typically the risk, unless your audit team determines otherwise, is overstatement of assets and understatement of liabilities. So therefore, you need to test the existence of this assets. You would request a listing of deposits in transit. You would make a sample from the listing. Let's say that deposit in transit listing has 100 checks in it, or whatever amount of checks there are in this listing. You would essentially sample from there, and you would make sure that, hey, the check, you would request from your client a copy of the check. You would see the copy of check, you would vouch it, and then you would say, okay, this check was sent, on 12/30 or 12/29 or 12/31 before your period end, and you would make sure that it didn't clear the bank until your subsequent period. So by that, you would request a subsequent bank statement. Typically, if you're auditing a 12/31 year end, you're usually going to start the audit sometime in January, February, or March, depending on what their reporting requirements are. So then you would request a subsequent bank statement just to make sure that that deposit did actually get cut before period end, but they didn't clear the bank until after. The third critical component of a bank reconciliation is going to be your outstanding checks. Your outstanding checks are going to be checks that your client sent to someone, but they haven't cleared the bank yet. And typically, again, since this is going to be reducing an asset account, the risk here is understatement. So the risk is that they're not capturing all of their outstanding checks within this population. And what you're going to do here is going to be a little bit different from testing deposits in transit. Here, what you're going to be doing is you're going to test the completeness. You're going to be using the completeness assertion. You're going to test the completeness of the outstanding check listing. And how you're going to do that is, again, you're testing let's say you're testing a 12/31. You would request either January or February, but typically you would only request the January bank statement if you were testing 12/31. and you would get all of the checks that cleared in that subsequent period. And then what you would do is you would say, okay, you had X client, you had X amount of checks that cleared the bank, or the checks that cleared after period end. That would be your sample, that would be your population size, and you would sample checks and wires from that population. And then depending on, you would then tell your client, hey, you had, I don't know, $100 of checks that cleared, or $1 million of checks that cleared after period end. I want to see, these 3 or 4 checks. I want to verify when they were cut. I want a copy of the check just to make sure that should it be included in the outstanding check listing or should it be excluded. You would sample those. You're going to request from your client a copy of those checks, and you would determine, okay, this check was written on, you wrote this check on 12/28, but it didn't clear the bank until January 10th. This should be included in your outstanding check listing. You would go back and trace that to your outstanding check listing, and you would determine that that sample selection of testing is properly included. And then to summarize this up and to kind of finalize it, you would take bank balance plus deposits in transit less outstanding checks equals your ending cash GL balance on an accrual basis. Again, let's go over it again. Bank balance, you're going to send a confirmation for this. Typically, you would use confirmation.com, but ask your senior, hey, how are we confirming balances for our client? Deposits in transit, you're going to test for existence. You're going to make sure that those deposits in transit actually exist. So you're going to test directly from that listing, sample checks from that listing, and make sure that those checks didn't clear until after period end. For outstanding checks, you're going to test for the completeness of this population. And what you're going to do is you're going to get the subsequent bank statement. Again, if we're auditing 12/31, you would get the subsequent bank statement, which would be January. You would get the total population size, the total population of checks that cleared after period end. You would take a sample of that population. You would request a certain amount of checks, and then you would ask your client, hey, let me get a copy of this check. And you would determine if it was written prior to period end, then it should be included in your outstanding check listing. If it was written after period end, then it should be excluded from your outstanding check listing. And the last step that you really need to complete in this audit, in testing cash, and this is something that you need to do always, either or, is you need to make sure that you complete your audit performing steps work paper. This is a form that typically all firms have in every section of an audit that ensures that you complete every single step in the audit process that your firm requires. Every firm is different on how they test certain account balances, but typically for the big ones, cash, AR, AP, you're going to have a certain amount of steps or inquiries that you need to perform with your client. So just make sure that you complete every single step in the audit in the APS form, which a lot of firms call it APS or whatever your firm calls it, audit procedure steps. Make sure you complete every single step in that form. And one thing I forgot to mention, but I guess it's even before you start getting into your testing, as soon as your client gives you a bank reconciliation, you need to make sure that that ending GL balance agrees to your trial balance. That is the first thing you need to do. Anytime you audit something, you're reviewing and auditing and analyzing the work that was already prepared by your client. Make sure that the bank reconciliation already agrees to the trial balance, because if it doesn't, you're already starting with wrong information. Just make sure your bank reconciliation agrees to the trial balance or whatever GL balance they have for cash. And that is pretty much it. Again, confirm bank balances, test for existence of the deposit and transit listing by testing directly from that listing, check for completeness of the outstanding checks by making a sample of the subsequent bank statement, and make sure that once your testing is all done, or even before that, make sure that your bank reconciliation agrees to your ending GL balance on the trial balance for whatever period that you're testing. All right, guys, it's going to be it for the video today. If you found value in this video, please make sure to smash the like button below. Until next time, work hard, dress well. Peace.